welcome back. I'm Keith Barry.
I'm Gabe Shanhar.
And I'm Mike Monticello.
And we're here to talk about the Mazda CX-90 today. Not CX-9, that's gone. CX-90 is the replacement. It's a three-row SUV from Mazda. It's kind of a new direction for Mazda, which we're going to talk about a bit. Now, we've had a decent amount of time with this vehicle because we've actually driven three. We rented two from Mazda. We rented a plug-in hybrid version. We rented a very high-end, tricked-out gas-only version with all the features. And then we bought and are testing our own, which is kind of somewhere in the middle, the Goldilocks version that most people buy, which is what we do when we buy a car. We buy the one that everyone buys. Now, the price range is around $39,595 to around $60,000. Ours was around $48,000. Ours had a 3.3 liter turbocharged inline six, all-wheel drive. It's not a plug-in hybrid. Gabe, this isn't just like a refresh of a car, right? This is something new for Mazda, right?
Absolutely. Fresh from the ground up, totally new chassis, totally new engine, inline sixes that Mazda never had before, new transmission, 8-speed automatic, all designed in-house. I mean, the car is based on a rear-wheel drive platform. It's Mazda seemingly just loaded the deck here and threw in every ounce of engineering capacity that they have. So their goal is really to push the brand up market. And with this kind of configuration, a rear-wheel drive-based vehicle, inline six, that's exactly the kind of configuration you see in a BMW, Mercedes, or Land Rover Jaguar. So these are the kind of, this is the aspiration of really having some credibility in terms of driver-focused, thoroughly well-honed engineering kind of a vehicle. So Mazda wants to really play in the big league. Not, I don't think it's thinking it's going to compete with BMW and Mercedes, but it wants to compete in the very competitive three-row midsize SUV, which seems like there is an insatiable appetite in the market for these kind of vehicles.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me is that at that low end of the price range, it kind of is right where the Highlander, which used to have a six-cylinder engine, now no longer has as an option, where that kind of exists. Monty, the Mazda Buyer, I mean, we know Mazda's kind of a small company. They do things a little differently. I mean, Gabe, you talked about how engineering focused they are, how it's sort of, how it was all in-house. What is it like to drive when they put this all together? Did they really get that target of because I have my own thoughts, but I'll hold off until road test editor here.
Yeah, I mean, I think they really did get it. And I think it's interesting because Mazda almost in some ways kind of reminds me of how engineering focused it seems, like almost like Honda from the 1980s, when nothing else in that category drove like a Honda Accord, for instance, and you could just, there was just a different feel about it. Same with this. It's now somehow, it's in between like Ford Explorer, Honda Pilot, Toyota Highlander. It's maybe around an Acura MDX in terms of, how nice it is. But like you said, Gabe, not quite at that BMW Mercedes level. And just the fact that this car says inline six on the front,
on the fender, there's like a badge that says inline six.
What other company is going to do that, right? And, we actually asked Mazda about that, and we said, and they're just so proud of this inline six. And it's possible, first of all, I think the Mazda Buyer is a little different than your average buyer, right? People who buy Mazdas, quite often, they really do want a car that just drives a little different than other vehicles. But Mazda is so proud of this that they put that on there. And I just think that's really interesting. But as far as how it drives, I mean, it drives really well. I mean, this is you don't have to, you can make, Mazda proved with their CX-9, you can make a three-row SUV that's front-wheel drive based handle well, right? They did that with the CX-9.
They did.
But they just, basically they took it up a level with this vehicle. And, like you said, we drove the top Turbo S. We have just the regular turbo. And we also drove the plug-in hybrid. And all three drive really well. In fact, I would say that the one we bought, which is the Preferred Plus, kind of like a mid-trim, with that even smaller, less horsepower, 280 horsepower instead of the 340 of the Turbo S, I barely noticed the power difference. And other than a few kind of low-speed hiccups, there's just... It's a combination of two things: a little bit of turbo lag getting off the line, and then it has very short gearing. Mazda said they actually put the extra 2 gears, because they've been using a 6-speed automatic for a long time now. They actually put the 2 gears almost kind of down below first rather than adding them on top of sixth. And so what you end up having is 2 very quick upshifts in a row, and it just causes a little. So you've got a little bit of turbo lag, so a little hesitation, and then with these 2 quick shifts, it causes just a little bit of a bumpy sensation when you first get going. But once you get going, once you get going, I think it's fantastic. I think it's got plenty of power. You don't need the 340. Like I said, I could barely notice the difference. And then once you are going, upshifts are super smooth. Downshifts come exactly when you want them to, and they're pretty smooth as well.
I totally agree. Gabe, you've spent some time in it too. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree that I felt that hesitation, particularly from a rolling stop, not from a standstill. In that kind of situation, you just end up giving the car, really conflicting commands, like in 2 things in a row. So it's a very common kind of thing. But I think that, and I agree with you, there's hardly any difference on the road between 280 and 340 horsepower. And that straight 6 sounds really good. It revs really smoothly. There's something very satisfying and very substantial feeling when you sit behind that engine. And I think dynamically, in terms of ride and handling, the steering is pretty terrific. I mean, it has a natural feel to it. The turn-in is quick, not too quick, and it's never darty or anything like that. And the ride, actually prefer the 19-inch tires on our car that we bought rather than the borrowed 21 inches.
Absolutely.
Because I think it makes the ride a little more civilized.
I found the ride a little choppy. I found, especially highway expansion joints and stuff, I found they did kind of punch in.
Yeah,
it felt to me
there is a bit of
it's not cushy.
There is a slight impact harshness there. I wouldn't call it choppy, but you feel some of the impact.
Yeah, I think that it's somewhere in between. Like it's not quite as cushy as some of the competitors, maybe, or not as plush or comfortable as you could say. I mean, you'd think maybe there's a little bit of a compromise made for the fine handling, right? But yeah, and as far as maybe that's one of the takeaways is, avoid the 21-inch wheels and tires if you can, because the 19s do make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me because, Mazda kind of almost reminds me a little of Subaru, in that they're kind of they're a small automaker and doing their own thing. And I know Subaru has the ownership with, they have their tie-ups with Toyota, et cetera. But Mazda is just really going it alone here. And it's interesting because they're a small company. They don't sell that much. It almost reminds me a little like a Jaguar Land Rover, but at least Land Rover has an identity. But Mazda, they don't have a high-end brand. I mean, they tried Amati in the 90s and it didn't go anywhere. Then, Honda has Acura, Toyota has Lexus, we have Genesis now from Hyundai. Mazda's doing this under their own name, and they, a $60,000 Mazda, it's a lot of money for a 3-row SUV from a mainstream brand. It's not a lot of money for a 3-row SUV from a luxury brand. So, are they pulling this off? Because, I have some thoughts about when I got in the car and I saw the price and I thought,
well, there are a few things that are going on here, but look, let's face it. People are spending $60,000 on Ford Explorers and Jeep Grand Cherokee Ls all day long, and these are not luxury brands per se. So I think, Mazda is saying to yourself, hey, why? If people are spending there, why not us? So that's a valid point. Now about Subaru, I can see the parallels, but in 2 different directions.
Yeah, totally.
Subaru is more like you step into a Subaru dealer, you feel like you're in a Patagonia store or something like that. And Mazda is like just the Japanese version of BMW wannabe. So it's a totally different buyer there.
But I think they're doing the right things. First of all, making this performance-based platform, doing it from scratch. and we saw the results of this inline six. You know, you might think, inline six, and maybe most people don't care or don't understand the difference, but you feel the difference, right? And forget the bragging rights. It actually does work really well. But also when you look inside the car, they did a great job with both the design of it and how nice the materials are. When you look at the two versions that we rented, okay, they're top trims, no question about it. But I mean, there was like yards of this micro suede all over the dash and the doors, stuff that you'd find in a SUV costing close to $100,000. And, you know, now the one we bought doesn't have that, but it still has really nice materials. They avoided the common thing that everyone's been doing, the glossy black, piano black trim. And
which Mazda kind of started back in the CX-5 years ago. That was like where that came from.
And you know, the problem with that glossy black trim is it looks great initially, but we found with so many test cars, it's so easy to scratch, to have fingerprints all over it, and to attract dust and grime. So Mazda, I think, went the right way with getting rid of that and doing this kind of other kind of neat textures on the center console that look kind of a little bit like, you know, different metal weaves or carbon fiber weaves or whatever, just something that is not that glossy black. And I think just in general, most of the materials just feel really solid and better than most of the vehicles in that regular mainstream 3-row SUV class.
Solid buttons and knobs
I disagree.
and
I disagree.
How dare
like,
you, sir?
I know. I like some of the, I mean, I noticed like the glove box is lined. That's kind of cool. There are a few other things which are, but I think whatever that sort of textured material they use across the dashboard in ours and the preferred plus?
Yes.
Yeah, in the preferred plus, it feels lower end. It just doesn't have that feel like when I get into, you know, Hyundai's really knocking it out of the park with interiors with sort of different types of materials. And this to me just kind of felt sort of like a CX-5, sort of like the CX-50, sort of like a Mazda 3. It didn't feel upscale to me. And I think maybe that's because I've only spent time in this one. I didn't get a chance to drive the higher end trims that we have.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at
the knobs and everything, I like the detents on them. I like how they click. I like all that stuff. I don't like the shifter.
Oh, well, that's another story altogether.
Yeah. And I don't like
let's talk about that.
Yeah. And I also don't like and I think some of our members agree, the infotainment system where Mazda doesn't have a touchscreen. They only have a sort of a jog wheel in the center console.
Right.
But yeah, back to the shifter. This is the first time. It's like someone took the original Prius shifter and like made it worse.
It's it's kind of the worst of both worlds because it's an electronic shifter, but it's not a monostable, so it doesn't return to its initial position every time.
And if you turn the car off, it doesn't automatically go into park.
Yeah, that's my favorite shortcut with all of these shifters. I turn it off.
It just yells at you that the car it turned on the parking brake, but it tells you the car could still roll away.
And then you press the start button again when you get back in the car, and it won't start because it's actually not in park.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, it's better in a sense that it actually moves to where and stays to where you're going to put it, right?
I don't see that as an advantage.
Well, it could be, right? If that's what we're used to, if that's what people are used to, actually moving the gear selector and it goes to whatever gear you put it in, whether it's, a reverse, drive, neutral. But the action of this one is just so weird to take it from park, move it over to the right into reverse and
Sideways.
then down to drive, right? And even worse, odder to me is going from drive up to reverse, then over to the left to go into park is just such an unnatural feel. Yeah, I think you'd get used to it as an owner, but it's just unnatural. And like you said, the weirdness of realizing, of not knowing that it's still in drive and you can't start the vehicle.
And these are going to be rental cars.
Yeah.
At some point, these will be in a rental fleet. At some point, someone will borrow one. At some point, someone will buy one and drive them for the first time. There is something to be said. I know you'll learn a shifter, but there's something to be said for it being intuitive.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. The shifter is lousy. And when I mentioned it to Mazda when they were here, they just said, no comment.
No comment. Okay.
No comment. Interesting. Well, we can comment. That's what we do here. What we do here.
Well, to me, that was an admission of guilt.
Well, and also, the infotainment, a few other things about it. That back seat. Now, ours is an eight-seater. That third row has a middle seat. And I don't think anyone who's large enough to not have to be sitting in a car seat could fit in it. That is just tiny. With 3 across in the back, that is a tiny seat.
I mean, I didn't try to sit 3 across in the back. I was just
We should afterwards.
Lucky.
Let's go.
We'll head out there.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Knock yourself out.
Look, the space is tight in terms of, and your knees are, have that uncomfortable bend. I mean, most Mid-size three-row SUVs are like this. I mean, I honestly have more than enough headroom sitting back there. But the cushions are actually reasonably comfy. It's
I'm a little wider than you are. So maybe I looked at that and I thought,
But
relatively speaking, for a mid-size three-row SUV, it's pretty decent in there. I mean, it may not be as roomy as a Honda Pilot, but it's way better than a Toyota Highlander.
that's true.
yeah, if you're driving 7, you'll have plenty of room. It's that 8th seat.
Yeah. And even then, it's another one of those adults in a pinch for short trips to go back into the third row. Otherwise, kids,
Yeah, exactly.
Pre-teens, yeah.
So, we talked a lot about the CX-90 now. We're going to have our full road test up very soon. Just how soon is a great question, and it is one that Bruce asked to talkingcars@icloud.com. And you too can send your questions, text questions, video questions to talkingcars@icloud.com. Bruce asks, I was recently on the CR website and I saw you'd purchased a Mazda CX-90. Yes, we have. We've been talking about it for 15 minutes. That was in test, but had a brief write-up. Once you post something as in test, how long is it until the full review is posted on the site? Well, you're the people to ask for this. Gabe, you're the one who runs the test meetings. Monty, you manage and write the road test reviews. So why don't we just talk about this process?
All right. Well, it takes time. So first
we buy it,
and then we put 2,000 miles of break-in miles and rotate staff through the car. And that takes time. Everyone gets their stint and everyone does their evaluations. And then it goes into a phase of empirical testing of acceleration and braking and fuel economy and handling, and
so that's when the fuel testing when it's is spliced into the fuel line and things like that, and that's braking and handling and all those sorts of things.
More than 50 specific tests are done. Tests and evaluations are done on every single vehicle. So it takes a while.
The windows are closed. But if they were open, you could see our test track and our 300. Is it more than 327 acres now because of the new?
No,
327.
327.
Yeah, we use the same 327. Just a better use of the land we have. Anyway, it takes time. So and then if we run into some weather snafus, that adds more time. And typically speaking, I'd say maybe 8 weeks until we have a full finished road test.
Yeah, it takes a while well, first of all, it takes a while to get it through the road test program. And then it takes a little bit to write each individual road test because they're anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 words. And, there's this huge check report that we have that all the engineers and testers and evaluators have put their information into. We have a ratings meeting where we discuss all of the scores,
at this very table.
Yeah, well, it used to do it in this very table, but since COVID, some people are doing it from home and stuff. But so we have a big discussion about that. We have a usability and controls meeting where the people who score those get together and talk about it. We have a one-day trip debrief meeting where all of us that are involved in kind of like the driving experience of the car get together. So there's a lot of things involved. And then this guy over here asked to, distill all of those different opinions into kind of like a CR's opinion on each one of those. Because while we can have our own opinions here, like for instance, you weren't as thrilled with the fit and finish of the CX-90. Gabe and I thought it were pretty good. Somehow we have to then average all the scores and feelings of everyone and take everything into account. And that then goes into the road test as kind of like CR's opinion on each and every single category and subhead within that giant road test.
A few of our evaluations are jury-based, so that gives you a collective opinion rather than being at the whim of one individual.
Exactly.
And I found one of the most interesting things, like you said, about working here is that, you're reading a review in any other magazine, in a newspaper or something. It's going to be probably a very experienced person's take on the car, and you might agree with that person's take or might have something in common with them, but it's just one person. Right. And here you're putting together, it's like a meta study. It's like the difference, one study says coffee's good for you, one study says coffee's bad for you. And you're doing we've looked at 50 different studies and have a cup of coffee.
Right. And kind of along those lines, Keith.
Espresso, better yet.
Yeah, sure.
We have a digital log. We call it a digital logbook on every single vehicle. So as Gabe talked about, during the break-in period and during the test period, lots of people are getting cycled through these vehicles, and then they're commenting, putting their individual comments on all these different aspects of the car. And then together, both in the tech report and then in the road test, we take those comments into account because everyone's opinion matters, right? Someone may find the seat uncomfortable. Someone may think it's the best seat they've ever sat in. And we have to then distill all that and kind of decide, well, it worked better for shorter people, or it didn't work as well for tall people, whatever it is. That's and then we try and bring that all together in the road test, kind of showing all different sides and all different body types and different backgrounds and everything. Bring it all together, and that's what we're going for.
Yeah, it's really unique what we're able to do here. If I can give a plug for
we think so.
The show you're already watching, the podcast you're already listening to, but it really is unique that we get to do that.
And that explains why it takes time.
Well, subscribe to our Cars newsletter, which you can do at cr.org, and we will send it to you.
There you go.
Not just you, Bruce. Anyone can do that. Yeah. Anyone can do that. So thanks for that question. We have another question from Jeff Leeds, Massachusetts, just up 91 from us here, who is asking, I've been calling dealerships all over New England inquiring about some EVs and plug-ins highly rated by CR. I have yet to find one that is at or below MSRP. The average so far has been $3,000 above sticker price. I don't qualify for the federal EV tax credit, so I want to lease an EV at MSRP and get the EV credit back as lease cash. Don't worry, we'll explain that. But it seems impossible to get these terms in the current market. This seems to be the norm now, and I don't really think it's a supply chain issue anymore. Thoughts? Monty, I know when we talked about this before, and you said you kind of distilled this into, it's like, they're kind of like two questions here, right?
Well, yeah. So I guess what I just am not 100% sure is Jeff saying that he is he just saying he's struggling to find cars that aren't over the MSRP, or is he also struggling to get a dealer to give him, if he's saying he's going to lease it, is he struggling to get dealers to agree to give him the, what would be the EV tax credit back as off of the price of the car, which the dealers, they can do it. They don't have to do it.
Yeah,
though, right?
let's kind of take a step back, because this is something that confuses a lot of people. So the way the Inflation Reduction Act changed the way the tax credits happen for EVs and some plug-in hybrids, you can get up to $7,500 as a tax credit. The difference
depending on your income.
And depending on the car. The difference is that there are now rules. You have to make under a certain amount. The car can't cost over a certain amount. The car has to be assembled in North America, and its parts have to come from specific places. And some of those are the United States, some of those are North America, some of those are from free trade partners. It's a really complex situation. CR.org, we have a bunch of articles about it trying to explain it. All of those rules go out the window if you're leasing the car. Long story short, a lease is considered a commercial sale. The Inflation Reduction Act has different rules for commercial sales, and the leasing company or the dealership can take a tax credit regardless of how much a car costs, how much the person who leases it earns, where it's made. So every car that's leased qualifies for a $7,500 tax credit if it's an electric car or a plug-in hybrid. But the dealership or leasing company then has to pass that on to the person who's leasing it in the form of a discount off of the price of the vehicle. They don't just hand you a check for $7,500. It comes off the price of the car. But a dealer doesn't have to do that. Dealer doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to give you any rebates, any discounts. They can just pocket that themselves, right?
Yeah. Let me address the first part of his question. So I would say welcome to our world, because we learned the no MSRP buying of EVs the hard way. So we know how it feels, because we end up paying between $3,000 and $5,000 over sticker, typically for even non-EVs, regular cars.
I just bought the GV70 electrified, and had to pay like maybe $2,000 over, I think.
Yeah.
And that and that was in New England. We had to do it. Yeah.
Another aspect here, and that pertains to the second part of his question, is in Massachusetts, you get $3,500 back from the state, regardless of your income, if the car costs less than $55,000.
So the car, if the reason why you don't qualify is either because of income or because of, look for state tax credits. CR has an incentive finder that you can go to and look, and you can find out what these state credits, actually in Massachusetts, I don't know about Leeds, but some towns actually even have town credits, or your electric company will give you a credit. So there are all kinds of credits you can get. But none of that really matters if you're getting charged over sticker price. And I think I kind of want to talk a little about that supply chain thing because I've looked into it. It isn't a supply chain issue. It doesn't seem to me, it isn't a supply chain issue like when in the early days of when plants were getting shut down due to, a COVID outbreak in a certain place and the plant would be closed and the parts just wouldn't be there. What it seems to me is that it's a supply chain issue in terms of EVs are still a niche product. They're still under 6% of the market, and they're a lot different to manufacture than gas-powered cars. And manufacturers are not going to build factories to build more EVs than there is demand. So the days of the compliance cars with $99 a month lease on a BMW i3, I remember, those days are gone because there's just enough more demand for EVs. The manufacturers can only make so many, and they're going to send them to the places where they're going to make the most difference. We're seeing new factories getting built. We're seeing new factories being built in the United States. We're seeing new suppliers of the minerals that go into the batteries. They're just not there yet. So this is, I would say, like this year, it's like a real bad time to buy an EV. I hate to say it, because a lot of these are really great cars, and it's like the first time we've had a ton of interest in EVs. But we're going to start to see, I think, in like a year even, manufacturers are saying, we're bringing a new factory online. We're bringing a new battery plant online. We're going to build this in the United States in 2025 so you can get a bigger tax credit on it. Things like that. And
speaking of the GV7, the electrifier you just mentioned, Hyundai Genesis is building it in Alabama. And that was part of the reason for that was so it can qualify for the tax incentive. That was according to the old rules, though, before they changed them.
Yeah.
And while we can certainly speak to, how much we've been paying over MSRP, which we didn't used to have to do, right? And what we can't speak to as much is dealers giving us what they do with the tax credit on a lease, because we don't ever lease these cars.
Yeah.
We buy every single vehicle. We never lease them. So that part, we don't know what the average dealer is doing in terms of giving money back or not.
No, we do know that some manufacturers in their advertising will say lease it and they'll call it like $7,500 lease incentive cash, or they'll give it some name. But like with any rebate, you have to check the dealer's math. You have to say, all right, Jeff, when you go to that dealer, ask, where is that $7,500? Right. Is it coming off the MSRP of the car? And hey, if they jack up the MSRP $3,000 and they take off $7,500,
scrutinize the whole thing at the dealer line by line.
Yeah, do your own math. And sometimes I've had it where they've just made a mistake. And I've believed them. I've had it where they've made a mistake, but also I've bought cars where they've just literally made a mistake and they say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and then just went in and changed it.
We're all human. We all make mistakes.
Yeah. So especially on math, especially me. Yeah. But so I'm always going to forgive those. But yeah, check that out. It is a weird time to buy an electric car.
Well, I think now you have a lot more choices than you had a year or two ago. I mean, our test fleet grew from 5 EVs in 2022 to 19 in 2023. That's a huge growth. So,
and people are driving them. People are enjoying people are using them.
Yeah, right. And, I mean, let's face it. I mean, buying a new EV is a rich people proposition. So
right now the average price is in the 60s.
Giving financial aid to rich people is probably not the thing we should advocate for.
And anecdotally, just looking around at our local dealerships, I'm still not seeing their lots anywhere near as full as they used to be. So there's still something going on that the dealers are either can't get as many vehicles as they used to get, or they've just decided they don't need to anymore. Like we'll sell more just on the spot rather
than
having
car
to
makers
sit around.
Realized that all that inventory, that they could make more money by selling cars basically on order or having that sort of scarcity. And a lot of car makers
It's weird because they used to look at it like sell as many as you possibly can.
Yeah. How do we do it? Volume.
Yeah. Right.
But how do we do it now? Exclusivity.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hurting the buyer.
Yeah, and with an EV, when you've got those people, they are expensive right now. Those inexpensive ones aren't out there yet. So
the average cost of an EV is $60,000 plus.
Yeah. which is
That's a
pretty
lot
high.
that's a lot to.
So they kind of know they've got you over a barrel,
Right.
and you might be able to pay. So good luck if you're out there shopping for an EV. If you're really, really set on it, good luck. It might be smart to wait a year or two and, get something when prices come down, which I'm sure they will a little bit. So,
and more choices.
anyhow, if you have a question about EVs, about plugins, about anything, we can draw back the curtain here at CR. Let us know. talkingcars@icloud.com. Thanks so much for talking cars with us, and we'll talk again soon.